It is 11 o'clock, so I'm going to start the meeting, and we can also invite the public in. And I thank members of the public for being here. Also thank all of you. So I do ask you, because we are live publicly, and they can't communicate with us, but they can listen. When you talk, if you say who you are, and just make sure we speak up clearly so the general public can hear us. So my name is Pat Kimball. I'm the chair of the committee. And we will start the meeting of the Governance Committee. And that first item on agenda is the process for tie votes. So we realized at our next meeting, just to recap, that we don't have a process for ties. What happens if the committee does? We also, as I'm thinking through this, and I may be overthinking, and if I am, please tell me. We also don't have a process that describes why you would abstain from a vote.
Why you would abstain?
Yeah, because we get a member who abstained, hence the tie.
Do committees normally require a why?
I don't know, not usually.
No.
So I just want to make sure that that's, it's funny, when you drive home, I'm driving my car back to Bangor, and I'm thinking, why did we have a tie? We don't have an we have an uneven amount. And then it dawns on me, oh, that's right.
Well, even with the abstention voting, you wouldn't have reached the 3/5 threshold.
Correct, we wouldn't have made the 3/4.
I did have a question about that. Is it 3/5 of the members present or 3/5 of the members on the board?
Whole council, I believe.
So,
Like Betsy
I
counts.
think it says differently.
Oh, does it? Because I counted Betsy and
Would it be in the
Joe
bylaws?
as
It'd be in the
abstentions
bylaws,
from
yeah.
the last vote.
It'd be in the MOU, I think.
I could be, I'm doing that by memory, but I thought for some reason,
It's in the bylaws, I think we've had
Yeah,
this
because that would
discussion
change it,
before.
what the 3/5 is required to.
I think it's in the MOU. I think.
I think it's, it says
President, it's set 4.7, Brendan, right?
of the
President.
bylaws.
Yeah, it says manner of acting, council shall act by consensus. In the event consensus cannot be achieved, council shall make decisions by a 3/5 vote of its members present in person
Oh, okay.
or by remote method in compliance with the remote meeting policy. So that day, we had 2 absent, and so we had 13
Mhm.
people and 1 abstention. That's how it ended up.
Just for technical, technically, that's a slight expansion or the opposite, slight limitation on the MOU, which simply says the council shall make decisions by a 3/5 vote of its members. It doesn't limit it to those present, but the council has adopted bylaws that limit it to those present, either in person or remotely.
I have another question. So does that also limit recording a vote in the future, like in committees in the legislature, they have X amount of days to record their vote?
I guess I don't know how that would work, because I'm not familiar with that. So as I understand the bylaws, we record the vote of those present in person or remotely. So what would be the future recording?
So the answer would be no.
I think
the answer is no.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so too.
Just seeking clarity. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a clarification. So we didn't meet the threshold of that. So we're open for discussion as to ideas as to where to go from here. Eric?
Hi, Eric Small, Deputy Chief, Sanford Police Department. I question whether we really need to have the position at all. I personally feel comfortable without having a vice chair, and that we could table the position altogether. Just wanted to maybe think about that as being an option, considering the fact that consensus or even the threshold of votes may not be reached. And frankly, I don't feel like it should be Courtney and I are obviously both sitting here. I don't want it to turn into we have to reach out and try to get votes to get elected. I mean, there shouldn't be politics in this. That's for all the wrong reasons. So if you're comfortable as the chair of not having, I mean, you have plenty of help. You could call any of us for anything at any time without having an official title. I think it'd be completely reasonable to not have a position at all and just move forward with the leadership that is currently voted in.
So my only question is, I always look to see what happens if Pat gets run over by the bus. So what happens if there is no chair? The vice chair at that point takes over those responsibilities. Now, that could mean that I can't guarantee that I'm at every meeting, which means the vice chair would take over, or I can't guarantee my health. Those are things that, in the middle of a term, you again, so the question is, and I know that any member of the committee, you're all really good about responding and you're wonderful at your job. So it's not about the workload, it's about the logistics of the way the bylaws read. So, again, so.
Brendan O'Neill, Assistant Attorney General in the Attorney General's office. Section 4.9 of the bylaws provides that meetings shall be conducted in the following manner. It's sort of a waterfall. The chair, or in their absence, the vice chair, or in their absence, the treasurer, or in their absence, the secretary, or in their absence, any council member chosen by the members present, assuming there's a quorum, shall call meetings of the council to order and shall act as the presiding officer for the meeting. So does that provide for?
Yeah. It does.
That would provide for if the position
Correct.
is not decided upon, it would go to the treasurer.
I mean, I think that's fine, except I don't know that Ben accepted the nomination of treasurer with the idea that he'd be second in command in Pat's absence.
Correct, but it's in the bylaws, so any of them knew that, it's in the bylaws. That I forgot until he pointed out, but, so here's the thing also. Remember that this position, these are only going until the annual meeting, which is the first meeting of 2024. So right now, we are only, the officers we voted in are only going until the end of the year, and according to our bylaws, that we elect officers the first meeting, which you can assume is January, but again, it's the annual meeting is when officers are elected, except for this year. So in 2024, officers will be elected at the annual meeting, which is the first meeting of the year, which I'm assuming is January. So people who were elected into that office at the meeting 2 weeks ago only have that office until the annual meeting. So if you went without a vice chair, you'd be doing it only, hopefully, only until like January. Gordon.
Gordon Smith, one of the governor's two appointments to the commission, to the council. Under section 5.3 of the bylaws, it does provide for vacancies in any office being filled by the vote of the council members. So if Pat suddenly had to get off the council or was unable to perform her duties, then, yes, the next meeting, under the current circumstances, the treasurer, in this case Ben Mann, would chair the meeting, but an eligible piece of business that day would be to nominate a person to fill that vacancy.
Correct.
So I think we have several options, but I mean, I kind of, just because, because January will be here before we know it, and further because it's quite clear that the council is quite split on this issue, and it's kind of too bad to start out our work. About the most important thing we have to do is to agree on priorities and start spending some money. It's kind of, I just consider it somewhat unfortunate that we start that process with arguably a division of the within the council, so that it might go better smoother, if you will, if we just leave things alone, as Deputy Chief Small has said, and spend our time, instead of worrying about who's gonna be the vice chairman, worrying about how we're gonna spend the money and get to that point.
Thanks, Gordon. Anyone else? So I am hearing that, I guess I'm gonna take a motion and a vote. If I'm hearing right, that this committee, the governance committee, recommends to the full council that for 2023, that we do not have a vice chair and that we wait for the elections at the annual meeting to have a full executive committee.
I'm happy to sign on to that motion, but I will just say I'm not sure what's gonna be different in January of 2023 unless we all can come to a consensus around a vice chair that is more palatable to everybody on the council.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, but then I think would been at this work for another 4 to 5 months, and people may have a better idea what skill sets, where they want to focus themselves and the work that they're doing. And so that may change things a little bit. I mean, again, that's the only thing. You've got almost 4 months in here. We're talking July, August, September, October, November. We're talking almost 6 months. So people have time in that point to really look at I'm hoping that in 6 months, we're really knee deep into, making determinations and moving, and someone may say, you know what, I'm too busy doing this grant and doing this, and I don't want that vice chair. Or they may say, you never know, someone may step up that's totally different that we don't know, that says, you know what, I want more responsibility on this committee. There's time to do that.
Also, I agree, and I'm happy to put forward that recommendation. I will say that I do not think that it's a bad thing that this council is having robust conversations about leadership or how this money is going to be spent. I think that that is the essence of what this council should be doing. This is a massive responsibility for the people of Maine, and we shouldn't always agree, but we should always be able to have a robust conversation and then move forward with our work.
Yeah, I totally agree. It speaks well of the committee that we ran into a roadblock, and we're going to say, we're going to move forward, we're going to figure it out and move forward, because we know the important work that's ahead of us. And I'll tell you, a lot of times you beg people to serve on officers on committees, and this is a pleasure to have two people who want to do that. So I think it's a good thing. So
Gordon Smith, I will second Courtney's motion, but I have a point of order to ask our council about. Under section 4.7 of the bylaws, talks about the council having to operate by consensus or a 3/5 vote. Does that provision also affect the subcommittees of the council, in your opinion?
I think that's really up to the committees to decide. I don't think it necessarily applies to the committees. I'd have to look at it more closely, but I think, let me just think about it for a moment.
But the subcommittee isn't making any policy, they're making recommendations. So is that different? Like, if you're serving on this committee, we're not voting for that to happen, we're saying this is our we're at a consensus that this is our recommendation to the full committee, which will vote, which will have to be the 3/5.
I mean, it's definitely not explicit about committees. Perhaps it could be. I don't, I'm not sure right now whether I recommend that it be explicit about committees. the provision talks about how the council shall conduct its work as a whole. I would certainly advocate for the committees to act by consensus. If there's an issue where a committee cannot achieve consensus, perhaps we can cross that bridge when we come to it. A 3/5 vote translates into 60%. Even a sort of relatively small committee that doesn't have that many members, what there would be. Can you get 10 copies?
I did.
Oh, good, thank you. Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we've got 5 people here, that's 60% of 5.
60% of 5, that's 3, it's
Great.
3/5.
Oh, right.
That was an easy one, Brad.
15
I was
is 10.
distracted.
It's okay. You're put under pressure.
Yeah, that was-
People shouldn't do math under pressure.
No, it's
Especially
true.
Not for me.
So yeah, 3 out of 5, I guess that would be a majority. I don't think we need to I don't think we need to make a specific decision right now. I guess I would recommend that committees try to achieve consensus about, how it make its recommendations to the council itself. But I'm happy to hear, different.
Gordon Smith, we don't need to resolve it today. I just thought it was an interesting question. If at such time there was a lack of consensus in a subcommittee, I do think that, or a committee, I do think that that I would advocate, if that decision has to be made, that we not have to operate by a 3/5 vote, that we're only making recommendations.
Mhm.
There's nothing in the bylaws that absolutely answers the question. So I would be arguing, just to get our business done, and because we're not a decision-making, by just making recommendations,
Right.
that it's constraining enough to have that provision affect the whole council. I'd
Yeah.
rather not have it affect the committees.
I probably agree with Gordon, but I just want to play this all the way out. So what happens if 3 people on the council want to do one thing, 3 people on the committee want to do one thing and 2 people want to do the other thing? Is there like a recommendation from the majority and a recommendation from the minority, or?
I mean, that was.
It's a rabbit hole.
Sorry.
Well-
But it's true. Again, I think that it's consensus vote.
I think my suggestion right now would be, and I was going down the same road before you spoke, was that I think the council would benefit from a report from a committee that says, the committee considered this issue, X number of people, came to this conclusion, Y number of people came to this conclusion. And, I think the council ought to hear from the different positions to the extent that but I think the committee's job, the committee should do work to achieve consensus. I don't think it should just throw up its hands and say, well, we have a different position, we'll go to the council. I think, but when there is a situation where the committee is, stuck, I think the council would benefit from hearing those different positions. And then the council ultimately would vote on how to proceed.
Yeah, I think that it gets to something that you said maybe in the last governance committee meeting that I thought was really poignant and important to the conversation, that sometimes how you build consensus is by letting people air their dissent.
Correct.
And letting that conversation happen. I think like with the vice chairship, like there are no hard feelings in the way that the vote happened. But if the vote hadn't happened, or if like that had been stifled, I think there would be hard feelings, because at least we were able to have the conversation. Does that make sense?
That's all about transparency. It's all about, I don't think anyone, if we all agreed on something, I think we should say we all agree. If we all don't, if there was 3 who agreed with that, 1 dissension, and that person who had descended. I think the full committee wants to know why they had the dissenting vote, particularly if it's something, you know, of value or real importance. So I think that's about openness and transparency, so.
I did just want to offer one more idea, and take it or leave it. It's not a big deal to me either way. Under the executive committee, I'm trying to find it, hold on. 6.3. It does provide for 3 at-large, I'll just call them at-large, 3 at-large members determined by the chair. One solution that I could suggest to our vice chairship problem is that Eric and I are both appointed as at-large members as a show of good faith to both quote-unquote divisions, unquote, of the council.
I love that idea.
And then that way, quote, unquote, divisions of the council feel heard and recognized and provided a vote in leadership of the executive council.
For clarity about the process, what 6.3 provides is that those sort of so-called at-large members are, you know, are determined by the chair with the approval of the council.
Right.
So the way I read it is, you know, God determines who those, you know, at-large members are using whatever process the chair determines to be appropriate, and then it would be put forward to the council and probably a vote on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I'm not speaking for the entire council because I don't, but I think it would be a good show of faith that each part of the conversation was heard and recognized.
I do, I like it. All right, so
Assuming the individuals are willing to serve.
correct.
What part are you talking
What
about?
is it?
6.3.
The executive committee.
I just want to.
It's the vice chairship,
Yeah.
I should probably speak loud enough. The vice chairship isn't, the only role of the vice chair is not just to hold the meetings if Pat's not there. The vice chair also sits on the executive committee.
Correct.
And to be
But
clear,
also
that
it provides for quote unquote 3 at-large members determined by the chair and approved by the board.
and the vice chair also, part of their job is to do whatever work the chair and the council want them to do. It's sort of an open, like, we have, here's another staff person to do, not staff, but here's another person to do whatever duties are needing to be done, which one of which we'll talk about later.
And in my mind, when people take the vice chair, usually they're a person that's willing to step up to a chair position in years to come. So, all right, so the motion on the floor is that the governance committee recommend to the council that for the year 2023, that we not appoint or not put in nomination a vice chair.
Can I make a suggestion on that?
Okay.
You know, an alternative could be that the council, that the, rather than sort of lock the council into that for the remainder of 2023, which has its merits, you could give the council more flexibility and say, for the time being, you know, or until such time as the, you know, I don't know, the council or this committee recommends otherwise. You know, there could be a time between now and the end of the year when some, you know, some amount of the committee determines that there is a need for a vice chair, or that there's consensus around, you know, who should be the vice chair. And so rather than, you know, council can do and undo things as it goes.
Correct.
But so it's sort of not of a whole lot of import.
Okay, so the amended motion is that governance committee is recommending to the full recovery council that at present, for the year 2003, unless I don't know, to think. That the vice chair position not be filled for 2023 unless circumstances arise where the council believes that position is necessary and will be filled.
Like Pat gets hit by a bus.
What are you doing to Courtney's point?
To Courtney's point, I'm not gonna put that in the motion, but I can tell you that will be my recommend, because it's, in the bylaws, it's a recommendation from me. So I can tell you that at the next board meeting, I will recommend and say that I am recommending that Courtney and Eric be placed on the executive committee. But I don't think it belongs in the motion. I think the motion is about the VP position.
I think we still have to have a vote based on your recommendation.
I can do that, but that's a second one.
Yeah, because it's approved by the council.
We can do that. So if there's no other further discussion on, Courtney did it first. Gordon, you seconded. All in favor of this motion going forward, please raise your hand. Okay, any opposed? Okay, for those watching, there are none opposed. Any abstentions? And there are no abstentions. So the motion carries unanimously. All right, for the second motion is that the committee is recommending that the chair nominate Courtney and Eric to serve at the at-large positions on the executive committee.
I'll second
You
that
don't
motion.
need our approval, do you?
It's been, I have a first from Betsy
I second it.
and Gordon seconded. Any further discussion?
Do you need our first and second? It doesn't matter, never mind.
No, because, actually I don't. It's an appointment.
Yeah, it's your recommendation.
Yeah, it's my recommendation. So thank you for your motions. I don't need it. It's a recommendation, and I will be submitting that to the full board. And we're all in favor of that? Did I do it that way? Any abstentions? Any not in favor? All right, let's go.
So you've got consensus on that.
It's a consensus on that. We consent, we agree, and move forward. Thank you very much for the patience on all of this. All right. Remote meeting policy. So the issue that I think the remote policy is that we're in agreement that the way the remote policy works meets our needs, but if I'm understanding it right, we want to expand that a little to be a little bit clearer so people know. Is that what we're looking at?
There's sort of two, let me provide,
Thank you.
two summaries. One is the sort of two issues, or two parts of the policy that are at issue are members can currently participate remotely when their physical presence is not practicable because either the council member or family member under their care, has an illness or, a condition that causes the member to face significant difficulties, traveling to and attending the meeting, or that the council member has to travel a significant distance to be physically present, or as a reasonable accommodation to a member with a disability. And the chair is the person who makes that determination that the physical presence is not practicable. So those are the current sort of criteria, and then the process by which a person, a council member, would take advantage of those criteria is to notify the council chair in writing no later than 5 business days before the meeting that it's not practicable and the reason, and have the technology necessary to participate remotely. And then the council chair makes the determination about whether the member may participate remotely. So there's two issues. One is the criteria, illness or physical or mental condition, or significant distance to travel or is a reasonable accommodation. Those are circumstances in which a member can participate remotely, and then there's the process by which the member triggers that. The circumstances that have been discussed at the council about, why remote meeting is desirable is, I've often heard the sort of time and significant distance issue. So that's currently permitted under the policy. The members have to, interact with the chair and notify the chair that the member, can't be there, can't practicably be there, and here's why, and then the chair decides. The policy, sort of implies that that's made on a meeting by meeting basis, but I don't personally see why, the chair couldn't kind of, grant kind of a standing determination for, particular members that, have to travel significant distances. So the discussion today was, as I understood it, that, what needs to be changed, if anything, about this policy to permit the council to more robustly and more commonly meet in a hybrid method where some are physically present, some are remote.
Gordon and then Eric. Eric?
Gordon, I sorry.
Okay.
I think we should, Gordon Smith, I think we should thrive to change the policy to accommodate either virtual presence or in-person presence, now that we've met in person a few times. This is to speak to my point, I'm not making a motion, I'm just suggesting that that's where I think we should try to arrive at. And I'll make two arguments. One is that this is how groups are meeting now. Yeah, it's a little more, the hybrid is a little more tricky to get it right, but even the legislature, which is a challenge at times, even they figured it out. And so I just think it's what people expect, and we're virtually working with volunteers here, and we should respect that. Secondly, while I greatly respect the fact that we should absolutely do this for people like Betsy and Miles who live 3 and 4 hours away, I think in the interest of encouraging everyone to participate, I travel a lot, but I'm virtually nowhere where I can't get on a Zoom. And so if I'm traveling and it's the day we're having a meeting, to lose one of the governor's 2 representatives to this council, I don't prefer, I hate to see that, when in fact it's can be relatively easily accommodated. So I just think we should significantly revise the policy to allow at any meeting, for any reason, including that I couldn't get childcare for that day, and I'm gonna have to help for a couple hours with a grandson on his way from Phoenix. So that's what I'd like to see us headed. I realize that may not be the majority view, but that's what I think we should be striving for.
Eric?
Yeah, just to build, Eric Small, Deputy Chief of Police, Sanford Police. Just to build on what Gordon said, I agree with Gordon, but I think breaking it down even further, taking the authority that Brendan talked about really out of the chair's hands and having to gain permission or give notice to you, or, everybody on the council are professionals. I would like to see it taken as far as, subcommittees or maybe always Zoom. I mean, it is easy to get on a Zoom, and you risk a hybrid model with you know, Pat, you show up and you're the only person sitting here in front of this camera and everybody else is
By
on Zoom.
myself.
Yeah, and it, you know, just, it's so easy to meet during Zoom, and, you know, some people are on at least two, three committees, and that's gonna be a commitment month to month, and Betsy and Miles do travel a long ways, and it just make it so much easier, and like to Gordon's point, if you're on your way to another meeting, you're in your car and you've got an hour, you can log on to this meeting from your phone and just listen, you know, and it's legal, just for the record, as long as you're not holding your device, but, to my point.
We're not gonna admit that to you, Eric.
To my point though, like, you can do that safely, and we've all done that if we go to a lot of meetings, and, you know, just by committing all subcommittee meetings to Zoom, and just, and also, that's the best way for the public to access us right now. I mean, more people from further away, as many people in the state can hop on a meeting knowing that it's always Zoom. I do think we should meet, and this is, I did from Gordon a little bit here, at least a couple of mandatory meetings in person in May. I don't think that's a huge heavy lift, and I can't speak for the other two, but, you know, a couple mandatory meetings where we do get together, we share a cup of coffee, we get to see each other, we get to check in, ask each other how we're doing. And those other meetings could also be fully, those monthly meetings, I mean, we're required by law to meet, is it two times. So those two times are mandatory in person. And we're meeting a lot more than two times. And the rest of those could just be Zoom, where the public knows where we're gonna be. They know the link. It's easy to get to. And you, or even the AG's office is sitting here, they set up all this equipment, taking all this time for us, and nobody thinks. I think it's just better to say it's this way, this day, and these two, it's this way. And it's not a heavy lift on people to get to their desk and come to meetings. That's my opinion. Thank you.
So my head goes two different places. So one is I think about other meetings that I'm involved in. And a lot of meetings that I'm involved in now, you have to RSVP electronically, and you say, I'm in person, I'm on, or I'm remote, or I'm not attending. So you have that option, and I think out of, yeah, so at least two committees I'm on, that's how it goes. So I get the materials for the meeting, I get the agenda, and I have to say whether I'm going to be there in person or come through remotely. So I also serve on a couple of committees that have never met again since 2020 hit, and we do everything by Zoom, including one that includes the public. So the Board of Visitors for Penobscot County Jail is a totally public meeting that's totally on Zoom. So the public they have the Zoom link, they can go on, they do that, and then our meetings, as we're totally remote. I think maybe we're meeting for the first time in person since March of 2020, but they're totally remote. The only thing I hesitate is I hate to use the word that we always do. I would hate to put that in a regulation that all committee meetings are Zoom. I always think to myself, well, maybe there's a committee that wants to meet in person. I don't know. I think I would leave it up, for me, I would leave it up to the committees. Once we get chairs appointed to the committees, that they determine themselves whether they're voting for all Zoom or a hybrid, however they want to do it. But I do like the idea of saying that at least one or two meetings a year people attend in person. It may actually be the annual meeting where we vote in new officers or officers' position, that be an in-person meeting. I don't know, or you leave it up to the people themselves to say they will attend at least. Gordon.
Gordon Smith. I thought about the annual meeting, and I think we should encourage people to attend in person when they can. The problem with that is that our annual meeting is in January.
Correct.
One of the
it's like
most
the worst
powerful
time.
arguments, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to.
It's just, the annual
change it.
meeting is, sorry, Brendan O'Neill,
No.
AG's office. The annual meeting is simply the first meeting of the year. Could be in April,
Well,
which is also,
most likely it's January, February.
And so for obvious reasons, I mean, that's one of the most important reasons in Maine to meet remotely.
Correct.
Is weather related, and it also limits our carbon footprint, which my GoPIF colleagues downstairs would want me to say. So I don't like kind of the mandatory thing in the sense that now the 15 of us have been together. There'll be real interest in people continuing to meet in person, in my opinion. So I wouldn't go to the mandatory thing yet. But yeah, so I think I've said all I need to say. And I guess what we're doing is we're kind of, maybe we can reach a consensus on, okay, these are the elements of the changes in the policy, and then we'd ask Brendan to draft it, I guess.
Okay,
There's also in the bylaws, there's 2 annual meetings. There's the one you guys vote at the beginning of the year, and then there's one that's a public forum in which the stakeholders and the public can give feedback to you. That might be a beneficial meeting to all meet in person rather
I
than
think so.
traversing the Zoom and in-person
think so.
testimony and.
But it needs to be virtual.
Oh, it will be broadcast virtual
Like-
as well. I just mean
correct,
like
but the council be all together.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't
Yeah.
have big strong feelings about this at all, really.
I
Like,
always
be in
broadcast to
person, don't
Zoom.
be in
Like anyone can
person.
always see it over Zoom.
Be
'cause
an
that
adult, pick
has
when
to-
you're gonna be here or don't. Like, I think that I agree with Eric, like, we are all very busy, professional
That's right.
people who can make adult decisions about when we're gonna be virtual or not virtual. What I will say is I think that it's important if anyone is on virtual, that any votes happen with camera on or by voice, just so that it's recorded on the record.
Yeah, I do think they don't get a vote right now if they're at home. Is that correct?
Sorry?
If you're at home and you're on Zoom, you do not get a vote?
It has to be,
Yes.
yes, it is, it has to be
It
roll
has to be
call,
roll
I
call,
think.
right,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
all right.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
there's
I
no
would-
show of
I
hands
would've-
at the moment.
Yeah.
There is an actual
Okay.
roll call when it's on a Zoom.
Okay, good.
That's
Yeah,
part of
everybody
it.
should be able to vote whether home or not.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Exactly, that's what yeah, that's the whole thing. So I think the bottom line is here, and please speak up if you don't agree with what I'm saying. Bottom line is that we think that all of our meetings, whether committee meetings or council meetings, there should be an ability for any members to come in via Zoom.
I agree.
Okay,
Based on their own decision-making process.
correct. And that they don't need to contact me. But we do need some process that we know.
You will have to contact me because I'll have to send you a panelist invite so that you can actually speak on the Zoom instead of being
Okay.
treated like a member of the public.
Yeah, so that's what we'll have to know. And how much notice do you have to know?
Almost none. I can
Okay.
edit the Zoom meeting anytime.
So if you
just
wanna
before
come
the
in
meeting.
via Zoom, you're gonna have to contact the Attorney General's office. And say that, so we can give you the link so you can come in and speak.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna ask Haley, you're gonna provide the link at all times?
Yeah, I provide it on the agenda
Yeah.
every, yeah.
So you're just saying you have to act. Like,
So
if you
yeah,
showed
so
up
when
at-
I provide a link, it's to view the Zoom, but you guys would receive panelist invitations so that you would appear and I could make your camera turn on instead of this camera so that you would actually be able to speak to us over the Zoom. Right now, the link I distribute, you can't speak or be heard. You just appear on a little list. Like Chastity, hi Chastity. She's watching.
That's why I didn't know how you get a vote currently if you did contact you if it's snowing and you're at home.
Oh, yeah, no, so I'd
Yeah,
make
no,
you
you
panelists
you'd
so
have a
that you
link,
have.
similar to the legislature, when
voice.
you want to testify, you can watch, and then when it's your turn,
They
they
let you in.
let you in. Courtney?
Could we possibly make this a little less admin heavy and just create a Google Calendar invite with a panelist link that only goes out to council members? so
Yeah,
that
I
we
could
don't
just
have to call you every
Distribute a
time?
panelist link to all the council members, and as long as it stays within
And just
the
throw it on
council
our
members.
calendar,
Yeah.
and if Eric
That's a
can't
great
get
idea.
here, he
Yeah.
just jumps on his calendar invite that only council members and admin staff and
Yeah.
DG have on their calendar,
Mm-hmm.
and he just jumps on his panel link and he's there.
Yeah, I think I can just add all 15 emails each
Yep.
time, and then whoever
You
can
can.
just
Yeah,
get on.
I was
yeah.
thinking of making this easiest on you because
Oh yeah, it's not too hard for the Zoom. I mean, the way it will actually play out in a room, sound wise, I will find out together. You know.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
One question I have is, the law requires that, all votes taken during, when someone's remote have to be taken by roll call. That can be both seen and heard, if using video technology, by other members of the public, of the body and the public. I guess my question is, does the group want to require that when a member is participating by remote technology, that the member be, keep their camera on at all times, or, be visible at all times, or just for voting?
Just for
Just,
voting.
yeah,
Just for voting.
if you are on the road, you're going to have to pull over if you want to vote, but you can listen through your hands-free.
Yeah, we have a way for people to call in, right?
Yeah, the dial-in numbers.
Yeah, but if you dial in, you can't vote the way that policy states.
Well,
And
you-
also, I
we
think if
can-
you,
We can change, the law permits us to change the policy
okay.
to allow for audio-only technology.
yeah, I gotta figure out how to allow dial-in panelists, because I know it verifies emails right now, but I'm sure there's a way that I can do it by phone number instead, but it might involve you guys letting me know what numbers you want me to verify as a panelist.
Yeah.
If you use your
I've
cell
never
phone.
used the dial, I just do the Zoom link on my phone and.
This is a webinar, it's
Set
not
it
a
down and
Zoom.
drive.
So
Oh,
there's
webinar.
panelists, participants, and then attendees, so there's like a different rank that I have to, so when I send you a panelist invite, it's gonna recognize that you're Eric Small and be like, you're allowed to talk.
I get
But if
it.
you call me in from someone's phone,
But
it
what
might not
Eric's
know.
saying is he usually uses Zoom, so you don't have to
So
use
this
his
isn't
phone
a
number.
Zoom platform.
It is
What?
Zoom, but it's a different.
It's a
Oh.
different,
type.
No, I was saying if someone dials in instead of using the Zoom link, then I don't know that it will verify their email. So I would need to know what number to verify you in as so that you can speak as a panelist if you're dialing in and not using the link.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So just use the link unless we
Even
tell
if-
You would use the panelist link that I'll send out to everyone if you want to do Zoom, unless you're calling in and you don't want to, you can't be seen, like you're using your phone to dial into the meeting instead of.
I guess I'm just saying this out loud, what I don't want to happen is anybody get hurt while Zooming while driving. So, like, they need to, have their video off and be able to vote while they're driving, hands-free.
I'll send you the footage if anyone's.
You know-
voting
you know what I
Just,
mean?
just to be specific on that point, for voting, you do have to have the video on if you're on Zoom.
So
Yes,
that's
sir.
where you're gonna have to pull over.
Yes.
Yeah. But if
Yes.
if you call in, you don't have to be visible.
Keep calling. That doesn't,
Uh,
that doesn't really make any sense, because if you're on Zoom and you don't have your camera on, you really are calling, you're in.
It's how the
you know.
statute's
It's
written.
how
That's the statute?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so then that's a workaround. You just
I
call
think
in.
that we should have to have the video on when voting.
So, again, yeah, I mean, that's fine, but that limits the
You can't
remote meeting
dial in.
policy only to video Zoom participation. It would prohibit the council members from calling in
going in.
on a telephone line, which the statute permits. And you can do what you want, but, just to clarify.
Well, they could call in and then just switch to a video camera if voting takes place in that meeting.
They'd
couldn't
have
they?
to do that, you'd have
Get
to
off
hang
on.
up,
Yeah.
If you're
you know,
calling.
click on the link.
Yeah, you
to-
just
to
open up your
activate Zoom.
laptop, click on the link, hang up your phone, you're already
Well,
on.
the
there.
whole idea is you're in a
You're
car
driving.
probably.
I personally don't think a different here, I don't need your video on for a vote. I know it's you generally by your sound of your voice.
Well, again,
I
it's
think what I'm
becoming,
saying is, if you join a meeting by clicking the Zoom link,
Yeah,
you will have to have your video on to vote. If you join a meeting by calling in to the number in the Zoom invitation by phone,
Mhm.
you do not need to have
Is that
video.
all right with?
yeah, if you know you're
I
driving
mean,
down the
it's
highway for
weird,
2
but
hours, call
sure.
in.
Well,
Yeah.
but I mean, if I'm tooling down the highway, and it's a pain in the neck to pull over, get on Zoom to
Yeah.
do the video when so again, I think it's a matter of convenience. I mean,
correct.
the likelihood of fraud or some other problem, you don't need to see me.
Driving, no.
You know my voice,
Oh, yeah.
we have the number.
I mean, the Zoom link has phone numbers where you can call.
Right.
You just need to identify who you are
Right.
when you call
Would it be helpful, Haley, if we all, council members provide their cell phone numbers to you?
You have already.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're planning on potentially using your cell phone to participate remotely,
I was
then
thinking
yeah,
it was on
probably.
that list that we had first.
I just want to say, I pulled over once to do a call and 3 officers in the hour I had pulled over on Interstate 95 knocked on my window to make sure I was okay.
Yeah.
And I said, just on the phone. It was quite cute. I thought, okay, they're taking care of the little old lady that's parked on the side of the interstate. No, I'm just taking a call.
Should.
So are we good? Like the
I
recommendation?
think what the recommendation is that we simplify this policy and really just state that members just need to identify how they're coming into the meeting, whether it's virtual or in person. Then there just needs to be a procedure for people to know who to call and who to email to tell them what that is. I think as far as committees are concerned, they can decide themselves whether they want to do their meetings virtual or in person.
In reading the statute, I observed that the statute says that the policy adopted pursuant to this statute applies to a board or committee that is within the jurisdiction of the public body, unless the board or committee adopts its own policy.
I think as a group, though, we should, as when the 15 of us meet next, I'm not sure as if leaving it up to individual committees. I think nobody should feel the pressure to drive down. So if you're on a committee and you live far away, and the committee says, well, hey, we want to meet in person, and one of our folks that lives far away should not feel like they have to drive 5 hours. They should know that if we decide on this, that they do not have to, as a matter of fact.
Correct.
You know, if one committee, everybody lives in Augusta, then I'm sure that's a simple solution.
I don't think, I should have clarified, I don't think anyone's going to say one way or the other. I think for me, it's up to committees. I mean, if they end up saying, we'll just soon meet in person, that's what we want to do, meet in person. If you want to do a hybrid where half of you are on, half of you are off, do it. If you want to do all of us meet online, go for it. Just abide by the rules, which means if you vote online, you have to do a roll call, and you have to see the person. And again, it's that piece of remembering that everything has to be, it is a public. So you can't just arbitrarily decide to meet as a governance without doing the appropriate notice time. And again, who's ever chairing the meeting has to be vigilant about watching screens and knowing who's on and raising hands. Some committees do it really well, others don't, so it's something we have to be vigilant about. And I would encourage members, if you're online and you've got your hand up for 20 minutes and no one's paid attention, you gotta be able to tell us that's what's going on.
Chastity just texted me and said if we want to see how the panelist works in real time with sound, you could make her a panelist.
I know how it will work with one person, and it'll work very well with one person because my owl won't pick up sound that's coming out of my computer. It's the idea that if I had like 7 of you in here all trying to talk at the same time and people out here trying to talk at the same time. So like with one person, that's how we did the MEHAF presentation or whatever we had, a month and a half ago.
The department.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so with one, I think we've got it down, even though, thank you, Chelsea. But we'll figure it out, what it looks like with a bunch of people talking.
So our recommendation is that do you have enough information to rewrite what you need to rewrite, basically?
I think so.
Simple.
I think so. I'll see what I can do with it. And my understanding is the rewrite comes back to this group. Is that right? Or does it go straight to the council?
I say go straight to the council. Go right to the
Can you get it ready by July 11th? I think that's
13th, or whatever it is.
13th.
I don't know.
11th.
Got a couple other things, but I will do my best.
Because
I do note that the statute says after notice and hearing, the body has adopted a written policy. So we have to make sure that there's enough public notice. And a hearing, I just want to check and see if there's an explanation of what a hearing is. If that means the council, has a meeting about it, that's one thing. But if the council opens up the meeting for a public hearing on the policy, that's a different thing.
Gordon Smith, we didn't do that in a separate hearing portion when we adopted the policy.
That's right.
So I wouldn't think we'd have to when we amend the policy.
You know, as I say, I'm reading this and it's hitting me a little differently now, and I just want to make sure that whatever policy the council adopts is, you know, adopted properly pursuant to statute.
So this is just my only thought, that the reason I'm sort of pushing it is I'd like to get this determined and settled. And so if we say that it has to come back to the governance, then we have to wait, and then it'll be the end of August by the time it gets done. I'd really like on this, if it's all possible, on this July 13th, that we voted in.
I think, right? Are we, is it the 13th?
July, I think so.
Oh, okay.
12.
Let me make sure I have
The
that.
20th of July is the summit.
Right, it's the week before that. I think we're the 13th. Let me look down.
13 sounds familiar. I don't know why I
It
thought
is the
it was the
13th.
11th.
1500.
Thursday the 13th, that's it, 3
Yeah,
o'clock.
so I would like to be able to vote on it so we could move forward and start having Zoom meetings. Courtney?
I agree. I just wanted a little bit of clarity. So are we saying that anyone can attend virtually to the council or committee meetings? And Haley's just gonna send us out a link and we don't actually have to tell anybody? We just jump on if we're going to, right? That's the, okay, great.
I mean, if we, again, I really like the fact that, and again, it's the United Way Board. They know you just have to click, like, I have a meeting on Wednesday. Friday, I got a notice saying, are you attending in person, remotely? Not at all.
Where are we clicking though?
Oh, they have a thing called On Board, so it's an online thing. It's a program that's where all your board material is, so it sends you a thing with all the board material, and it sends you it, and it's easy. So the chair of the board knows who's coming in virtually and who's not attending and who will be attending in person.
So do you want us to do that on the calendar invite that Haley sends out?
I mean, that sounds a little more sophisticated than,
It's a little bit more sophisticated, but it would be helpful to know.
Have a list of who's.
I think.
I mean, if we're gonna get a list of everyone who's gonna be a panelist, then I would probably just distribute the link to those people. I feel like that.
Okay, yeah.
But that's different than what we just said,
Yeah, I thought I was gonna just give it out to everyone so that there was no need to compile
a list each time.
Correct. Either way works, but
Oh.
but I'll know, again. Never mind. It's okay. Just send the link out to people who need the link,
should I send the people out, linked out to people who need the link?
who request it. No, send it to everybody.
Right.
Okay.
Send it to everybody. Coffee. I need caffeine. All right.
I think the thing though, the most important person that we want to know where you're gonna be is you. Like, maybe you notifying, hey, I'll be in person, or I don't want you showing up here with nobody here. That's
He'll be here. Gordon will be here.
Maybe.
Probably be here.
Maybe.
Courtney's always here. Courtney will be
Meetings
here.
Just live here, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as you're okay with that.
Yeah, I think as we move on, we may come up with another solution, because there's a part of me, and I don't, maybe my control issue, that it would be nice to know how many people are coming in person and how many aren't. And then there may even be things like, if I know I'm coming in remotely, I may want, if I know who's in person, have them take over part of the meeting for me, because it's difficult sometimes to chair a meeting remotely, I'll tell you.
Why don't we just make a group norm that says, if you are going to be virtual, just send Pat a text.
There you go. Text me. We can, that doesn't have to be procedure, that just can
Just
be
like
a courtesy.
professional courtesy. text
That's all that
Pat.
can be, and we can say that, just so I know. And again, it may be if I can't for some reason attend in person, I may appoint somebody to be in, that's there in person to do some things, because it is hard to chair remotely sometimes, when particularly, it's easy to chair when everyone's remotely. When it's virtual, it's difficult to chair that meeting.
It would be nearly impossible.
I think there'd be challenges, and we'll just face them.
Mhm.
I'll smooth it out.
But again, it's one of those things we'll work through. Okay. Do you have enough?
I'll see what I can do. The short answer is, yeah.
Okay, and I'd really like to vote on
I
it
understand.
and sort of get it settled on that 13th. And then it's one more thing that's logistic off our plate, and we can move forward.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. All right, next on any other discussion on remote? I think it's gonna make our work a lot easier, particularly with committees and people are getting anxious to do that. So, where'd my agenda go? Next on the agenda is
Conflict of interest policy.
conflict of interest policy.
So the status of it is, I've finished my work on drafting well, let me put it this way. I finished my work on drafting. It's been circulated internally in my office for review and comment. Unless the review identifies parts that need to be changed, I think it's pretty close to being done, if not actually done. But it's not ready for this meeting, which is why you don't have a copy. But I did want to start walking through this committee some information about it. And so even if you had a copy, this would require some education about it. So we're going to start with some of the education about what to expect from the conflict of interest policy. And that'll make it a little easier to digest it when it is ready to be circulated. But it definitely has to go through at least one and potentially, 2 levels of review internally, which, I can't predict how long that will take, but I think it'll move along. In general, the concept starts with the statute that was distributed to you by Benedetta, thank you very much, which is section 10107. And for those listening, it's titled 35A, section 10107. This describes the conflict of interest. This is the statute that provides for conflict of interest as applied to the Efficiency Maine Trust. As I often do, I look to the Efficiency Maine Trust as an analog of a quasi-governmental entity in Maine that gives out grants and other distributions of money to look at how they do things. In this case, it's a very short statute, and it simply says the trustees, which I think of the board members as being analogs, the council members as being analogs of the trustees of the Efficiency Maine Trust. And the trustees are, in effect, certain conflict of interest statutes in Maine that apply to executive employees and other sort of high-level people in Maine in state government. Those statutes also apply to the trustees. The trustees or the employees of the trust or the spouse or dependent child may not receive any direct personal benefit from the activities of the trust. And the second sentence, the section, however, does not prohibit corporations or other entities with which a trustee is associated by ownership or employment from participating in the program activities of the trust, so long as disclosure is made and the trustee abstains from voting on matters relating to that. A similar concept shows up in the Maine Health Access Foundation conflict of interest policy and the bylaws. If you switch to the, why did I print this? No, I got confused.
This one.
Yeah, but I had also, so the conflict of interest, Maine Health Access Foundation conflict of interest policy looks like this document. It's a separate policy of MEHAF, but also I printed out an excerpt of the MEHAF bylaws, which is this document. It's a one-pager, and it shows sections 13.1 through 13.4 of the MEHAF bylaws. And those two documents read together constitute the how MEHAF handles conflicts of interest. And the important concept here is that as you read through, especially the conflict of interest and duality of interest policy, it contemplates that MEHAF is comprised of people who are experts in Maine on the issues that the organization deals with. And it's very likely that there's going to be dualities of interest, that, those people, because of the nature of their work and because they're valuable to MEHAF, also have relationships throughout Maine in the work that they're trying to do. And both the MEHAF policy and the Efficiency Maine policy basically take the approach of, it's a small state. It's very likely that the people working on these issues know other people or are otherwise affected by the work that they're doing. And the approach to take here is disclosure. In other words, a council member would say, I have this relationship with this entity that's applying for money. And that council member, in the case of MEHAF and the trust, would, after making known the potential conflict of interest, abstain from voting on matters relating to that participation. The MEHAF policy goes a little bit further and says that the trustee of MEHAF shall answer any questions that the other trustees have about the matter, and so that the trustees can determine whether there's a conflict of interest. So really, to summarize, in looking at these provisions, I've sort of put together a draft conflict of interest policy that attempts to acknowledge that the council members, both this group and future council members, are likely to come from the community that is going to be applying for money and is going to know everybody who's going to be applying for money. The cure for those potential conflicts or the dualities of interest is, first of all, disclosure of even a potential conflict of interest, making yourselves available to the council to answer any questions so the council can determine if there's a conflict of interest. And then if there is in fact a conflict, recusal from any votes or other decisions on the matter. One difference between these two approaches, Efficiency Maine and MEHAF, and the version I've put together is the other two policies also apply to employees of those entities. This council doesn't have employees. The employees of the AG's office are covered by other statutes that are criminal in nature about taking gifts, improperly and things like that. I worked on a concept of applying the conflict of interest policy to vendors of the council, because the council was anticipating, hiring somebody on a contract basis to help manage the council's activities. And it sort of bogged it down and became complicated. And so, I have a draft provision in here that, essentially directs the council to include appropriate conflict of interest provisions in any contracts that it engages in with people or entities to conduct its work. For example, Pat, you've talked to me about bringing in, nonprofits or other charitable entities to, handle some of the council's work, like reviewing grant applications. There would have to be some sort of something in the contract that would address the fact that, that entity may itself have some, interest in making an application at some point, or an individual who is a consultant on a particular thing would, their contract would have to have some provision. I just, I want to acknowledge that these models that I looked at applied to both the principals, the trustees in their cases, and the employees. Because the council doesn't have employees, I've already spoken to that, but it became a little bogged down trying to apply it to vendors as well. So I just want to flag that issue. And then, so that's sort of the starting point, is saying, let's look, apply the same rules that apply to other quasi-governmental entities in the state of Maine, Efficiency Maine. Let's fill in whatever we can that would be appropriate from other non-governmental entities that work in this field, public health, grants and distributions. And then further fill in the background using these statutes that are listed in the Efficiency Maine Trust statute, which are Title V, Sections 18, 18A, and 19, which govern, the disclosures and conflicts policies that apply to, high-level people in the state of Maine. And in general, the approach the draft policy takes is, if you have a conflict or a potential conflict, you disclose to the chair. You try to avoid, appearances of conflict of interest. The council has to acknowledge that there's going to be situations where, people likely have a duality of interest, and you try to mitigate it by the member not being involved in the proceeding, having, responded to and answered questions. So it tries to be realistic and allow the council to engage with those entities that may have a relationship with a council member by leaving that council member out of the work. The draft policy has to take a slightly different approach than some of these statutes, Title V, 18, 18A, and 19. Those statutes apply to the individuals and provide for certain penalties if the individuals inappropriately engage in activities that they are prohibited from engaging in. The council doesn't have that authority. So the approach that the draft policy takes is that in the event that there's a conflict that comes up after the fact, that there's steps the council can take and has to take to mitigate the contracts that it entered into. There's also, let's see, there are the requirement for disclosure under the draft doesn't apply solely to the council members. It also applies to applicants. So as a check and a balance, the council members are asked to disclose conflicts of interest. Also, applicants are asked to disclose, do you have a connection with members of the council or a vendor, as a way of ensuring that there's coverage of all the issues. And then finally, the last provision provides for the council to annually submit to the chair or the chair's designee, and this is where a vice chair can be helpful, a financial disclosure statement. And the draft policy requires the form to be the same form used by the Commission on Governmental Ethics and Election Practices here in the state of Maine, as required by Title V, Section 19. Unless a member is already required to file that form, in which case that filing can be used here at the council. A paper version, so let me back up. Legislators and certain high-level state executive employees are required to file certain financial disclosure forms, which, as I understand it, apply to require disclosure about sources of income. They fill out this form, and in both cases, they're filed with the Ethics Commission. They're made publicly available on the Ethics Commission's website. The Ethics Commission plays some additional role with legislators, but not with executive employees. The employees simply file it, it's publicly available, and that's, as I understand it, and I may not be characterizing that part right, that, as I understand it, that's the end of the line for those. The point is, there's a form that everybody who's in a position of, certain high-level positions, fills out, files with the Ethics Commission, and it's available for the public to see at any time. As I've mentioned, 2 members of the council have to file these forms already. Representative Crafts and Ben Mann, Deputy Commissioner for DHHS. And the form that that I've circulated, the paper form that you have, is a paper version of that disclosure form. My proposal is that the council members submit the same exact form as executive employees have to submit. It goes to the chair, and there's procedures in the draft policy about what to do with it, and when it needs to be submitted, submitting updates. Critically, there's a sort of, again, the council doesn't have, let me back up. The statutes that require these of executive employees have certain penalties if they're not submitted on time. Again, the council doesn't have the authority to impose those kinds of penalties on themselves. There's the draft policy has sort of an or else that replaces the penalties under the statute, which are to say, a council member who hasn't complied with the article as a whole, the conflict of interest policy as a whole, and hang on, let me just read this. Yeah, with the conflict of interest policy as a whole, but in particular, I'm sort of have in mind this financial disclosure form. If somebody, for example, hasn't submitted the financial disclosure form to the chair, that member may not be counted by the council for purposes of voting or quorum on any matter before the council. That's that's in the current draft, and the council will be able to weigh in on this. And finally, again, the policy proposes that all of these financial statements, all of these financial disclosure statements, they certainly are public records. We can't do anything about that. But it provides for those those forms to be placed on the Recovery Council's website in the same fashion as they are posted on the Ethics Commission's website, so that there's parity among council members for these conflicts of interest. For these financial disclosure forms. So in the same way that you'd be able to, download information about a, council member who already has to file a form at the Ethics Commission, you'd be able to access and review the form filed by any other member of the council. So there's not 2 tiers, there's not different levels. The information is public, it's out there, it promotes transparency. And I, just note that the MOU, I think I've probably said this before and I apologize, requires that the council shall operate with all reasonable transparency as well as in compliance with Maine's freedom of access law. The council will have to decide for itself what reasonable transparency means, but just note that, we've talked a lot about at the council level how much money the council has the authority to distribute statewide. And, this draft policy is so far written with the intent of promoting the integrity of the process by providing transparency and disclosure to the public of, those who are interested in the council's work. I'm happy to answer questions, but again, just to walk you through the documents that I laid out. This, I provided the statute 10107, which is the Efficiency Maine Trust. It refers to Title V, Sections 18, 18A, and 19. You have those. You have the MEHAF Conflict of Interest and Duality of Interest policy. I recommend you take a look at that. That dovetails with the MEHAF bylaws, their conflict of interest provisions in their bylaws. And then finally, there's the financial disclosure form. The financial disclosure form is when you see what people have posted on the Ethics Commission website, you'll see that it's more streamlined than what this form provides. And this form probably looks more daunting than it really is. The proposal is the council members fill this out and submit it once a year. The policy right now provides for submitting it the day after. It has to be submitted to the Ethics Commission. And, you know, the policy calls for it being updated when there's reason to update it. That's a lot of talking. Happy to answer questions.
Well, Gordon Smith, I think you've done a good job to give us the elements that your written policy is going to have in it. I think it all makes sense to me. I think for the council members and myself, I think that being able to look at some concrete examples is going to be more valuable. Like, I mean, I think about, for instance, so our chair was at one time the CEO of a significant size social service organization that does receive state funds. You know, because to my knowledge, she no longer has not a board member any longer, but, you know, would the fact that Pat was the CEO at Wellspring at one time, to me, it's almost the kind of thing that, yeah, you'd probably disclose that, but it wouldn't be it would be really up to the council yourself whether you precluded, yes, whether you withdrew from any consideration of their application. Obviously, if she were, we have people, Mr. Everett is the CEO of Opportunity Alliance. So have all kinds of, I think they run our 911, they do our 211 system, among other things, do a lot of things. So obviously he would disclose that and then not participate in any discussion, leave the room if there was a pending application for funding from his own organization. Now, but between those two things, there's probably a dozen other variations of if you're a board member but but you're a volunteer, because the policies also talk about being a volunteer of an organization. So again, I just think it's that kind of discussion. In my opinion, the policy itself is important, but it's the education about the policy that needs to come from our council or other elements in state government. That's going to be equally important so that people understand why, and so it will be triggered. Oh, my wife serves on the board of the Sanford Housing Authority, and they're indirectly or directly involved in X. I should let people know that.
The couple of things to say in response. One is I haven't yet come across, you know, any sort of document that provides like examples or scenarios to consider. I'll see what I can come up with. I don't purport to be, and I'm not an expert on conflicts of interest. And you know, and I'll see what I can try to find, you know, along those lines. In general, the policy is written to favor disclosure, and especially to favor disclosure even when there's a potential conflict of interest, when a member thinks there might be a conflict of interest, and the council, after consideration, votes on whether there truly is a conflict of interest. And I suppose that kind of thing can be done in batches. You know, at a given time, different council members can say, I think I have I have a connection here with this thing, and you know, any other members and so forth, and then the council can vote on, batches of those kinds of disclosures. I do want to point out that the policies I've looked at focus on whether members, in these cases, trustees, receive, or their family members receive a financial benefit. In some cases, they use language like direct or indirect financial benefit. The scenario that I don't think I've seen is a situation in which a member serves on a board for a nonprofit and is not compensated for that service, where they're a volunteer in an entity that, at any level that applies to the council funding, may not fall specifically within the conflict of interest policy. It may not be a conflict. But that would be the kind of thing that, I would encourage council members to disclose. And then the council members can decide for themselves whether or not that truly is a conflict. And if it is, if the council members think it's a close call, the worst case scenario is they, ask the council member to recuse themselves, and the council goes forward with its, determinations.
Would you disclose this on this document? Because this is a lot reference to income other than
In the back.
the business entities. I saw that.
So for the record, I don't propose that I make any changes to this document.
Yeah.
I think my recommendation is that's a document that,
Oh, I guess.
state law requires, certain folks to make their disclosures on, and the council ought to do the same thing. Efficiency Maine trustees use that form, Ben Mann uses that form, and so on. I mean, I note that Ben's position is, overseeing the distribution of, lots and lots of money that's appropriated by the legislature. The trustees of Efficiency Maine make lots and lots of grants and distributions. The MEHAF trustees do the same. It seems like it, so in short, I wouldn't make any changes to that form. But the policies requires the council to use whatever form that the Ethics Commission uses. So if the Ethics Commission makes a change to it, fine.
Do you have this form digitally, or did you say that you could go online and fill this out someplace?
I do, I have a version that I think can be digitally completed. The Ethics Commission requires folks who have to submit it to them to fill it out on their website. We don't have that capability, and I mean, in theory, we could, the council could ask the commission to, let the council members, fill out and submit the forms to them and post it on their website in the same way they do with others. But, they might do that for the Efficiency Maine trustees, but we'd have to, ask them and enter into some kind of agreement. They're not required to right now, and most entities don't want to take on any more work than they need to.
I think if Pat could distribute this in a fillable form,
Yeah.
It's pretty self-explanatory. Pretty easy to fill out.
Gordon Smith, I took a look at that, the positions in for-profit, nonprofit organizations, and I don't read it to affect volunteers unless you're sitting on the board and have an officership, whether paid or not. And yet, so the situation I talked about, and it would be the same position for me, if the Maine Medical Association and their nonprofit Center for Quality Improvement, they do quite a bit of work now in this space. I have no longer any income from the Maine Medical Association. I have no legal relation to the Maine Medical Association, but I was with the organization for 39 years, and Pat was with Wellspring a long time. We need to set the example by saying, I would absolutely disclose, and I would take myself out of any consideration of their applications just because I was so identified with that organization, even though I'm no longer. So I think, again, there's things that, these are the legal things, but I think there's also, as you say, it's about protecting the integrity of our process. And nobody would want the public to, or ProPublica, or the Maine Monitor, to go in and look at, a year from now and see that that the largest grants went to organizations that any of us had history with. It's not appropriate.
I think, one of the things Gordon said, I think it really is important to set a tone. Again, it may not be a conflict of interest, but if I perceive it to be, for instance, if I use myself, so if Wellspring applied to something, I may look at that and say, you know what? I know that it doesn't technically fit the policy. I don't currently work for them. I don't currently serve on a board, but it is an organization that I don't know if I could look at ethically and not evaluate from my heart. It's not on the paper, but it's from my heart. And so for that reason, I'm going to pull myself out. Now, we have to be able to allow members to do that, to be able, in some cases, you may say, oh, you know what? I once served on the board for the homeless. I just want you to know that was 4 or 5 years ago, but I feel quite comfortable in voting. But if you all, as a committee, don't think that, please let me know and I will cruise my vote. So there has to be a level of comfortness that we feel good enough to be able to say, I'm perceiving this as a conflict of interest, and let the council decide amongst themselves. And there are some things we'll say, oh no, we're quite comfortable with you going forward. But we also have to respect individuals who, like Gordon's saying, I don't care if I do meet the criteria. I'm too close and too associated with this organization to vote on this application. We have to be able to say that comfortably and respect that.
Noting that we're out of time, although that's your jurisdiction and not
It
mine.
is.
I just want to say one last thing, which is what I've described to you has the caveat of my office and those above me may require me to make changes to what I've just described to you. The other thing to say is, as soon as it is clear, I will distribute it to this group. And, we can discuss the next step to take.
And I will tell you how important this is. I don't think we can determine the distribution of funds without an appropriate conflict of interest policy in place. As much as we want to, we can't unless this policy is in place. It's just, you're just opening up a whole thing that we don't want to do that. So this is really essential, a part of our work, that we get this out, agreed upon, and that we believe it's the best policy for the council. So.
I gotta run to it.
Me too.
Okay.
Because I know you're busy. So I'm going to adjourn this meeting. I will let you know when our next meeting is. I'll send either some information